The auditorium roared with applause as the decorated officer stepped onto the stage. His chest glittered with medals, his uniform pressed to perfection. Cameras flashed, dignitaries stood, and the nation saluted him as a hero. But when the ceremony ended and the lights dimmed, he stood alone in the shadowed hallway staring at the polished medal on his chest. To the world, those medals were symbols of glory. To him, each one carried a memory of a name, a face, a life that never made it home. That's the part no one sees. Behind every crisp salute is a moment of doubt. Behind every ribbon is a story of loss. Behind every command given is a leader who bears the weight long after the battle ends. There was the lieutenant who missed the birth of his daughter because his squad was pinned down overseas. The captain who carried the guilt of every man he couldn't bring back. The commander who had to earn her authority not with words, but by proving, again and again, that she was worthy of leading men who never wanted her there. And the general who sat at a desk thousands of miles away, his signature sending men and women into battles he knew some would never return from. His war wasn't fought with bullets, but with decisions that haunted his dreams. The uniform is sharp, dignified, proud. But beyond the uniform lies the untold truth. Sacrifice isn't just in combat. It's in the birthdays missed, the funerals attended in silence, the weight of responsibility that no medal can ever lighten. These are the stories not told in parades or recruitment videos. They are whispered in late-night phone calls, carried in folded letters, and hidden in the quiet moments when warriors remove their uniforms and become human again. This isn't just about strategy, victories, or defeats. It's about the people behind the rank, leaders shaped not only by war but by the choices, sacrifices, and scars that never make it into history books. Because true strength isn't just measured on the battlefield. It's measured in the moments no one sees, when leaders stand alone, carrying the weight of command that will never leave them. The battlefield does not always roar with explosions. Sometimes the sharpest pain comes in the quiet absence of home. Take Lieutenant Marcus Hale. On the day his wife went into labor with their first child, Marcus was halfway across the world leading a convoy through hostile territory. The radio crackled with updates from HQ, but none carried the words he longed to hear. It's a girl. She's safe. They're waiting for you. Instead, his ears were filled with coordinates, enemy movement, and the constant hum of danger. When the baby was born, Marcus wasn't there to hold her. He wasn't there to hear her cry or to see his wife's tears of joy. He received the news in a sandstorm, crouched under a Humvee, scribbling his daughter's name into the dirt as rounds snapped overhead. For him, that moment was both the proudest and the loneliest of his life. This is sacrifice, one no medal ever mentions. Then there was Captain Sarah Donovan. She led a squad deep into enemy territory on what was supposed to be a routine mission. But routine doesn't exist in war. An ambush claimed 2 of her men, and though she brought the rest back alive, the weight of those losses clung to her like a shadow. At home, people congratulated her for bravery. They shook her hand, called her a hero. Yet in the silence of her room at night, she replayed the screams, the decisions, the what-ifs. She carried that guilt into every mission afterward. To her, leadership was not about wearing rank on her collar. It was about carrying names in her heart. Every success she achieved was measured against the lives she could not save. That is a burden no one outside the uniform can ever truly understand. But sacrifice isn't only about the moments in combat. Sometimes it's the years in between. Commander James Whitaker had served for over 2 decades. In that time, he missed birthdays, anniversaries, and family milestones too numerous to count. His son learned to ride a bike without him. His daughter performed in her first school play to an empty seat in the front row. His wife carried the weight of 2 parents, while he carried the weight of command overseas. When James finally retired, his son was a teenager. They looked at each other like strangers, 2 men who loved one another but had been separated by duty for too long. That distance, carved by years of absence, was another form of sacrifice. The truth is simple. The front lines stretch further than any map can show. They extend into living rooms where children wait for a parent who may not come home. They echo in hospitals where families gather after the news no one wants to hear. They linger in the silence of reunions, where joy is shadowed by the question, "How much did we lose while you were gone?" Behind every soldier in uniform is a network of people who share the burden. Their sacrifices rarely make the headlines. Yet without them, the warriors on the battlefield could never stand as tall. And so, when the world salutes its heroes, it must remember the price of service isn't only paid in combat. It's paid in missed moments, fractured time, and wounds that no one sees. The uniform shines under the spotlight, but beyond it lies sacrifice, etched into hearts and homes, an unspoken truth carried quietly, yet endured with unshakable strength. True leadership is rarely about the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it's found in the silence, the unspoken authority of someone who commands respect without demanding it. Major Elena Ramirez understood this better than most. From her first day at the academy, she was underestimated. Being one of the few women in a male-dominated program, she was met with smirks, whispered doubts, and the constant undercurrent of, "She doesn't belong here." Her response was never words, it was performance. During grueling endurance drills, while others collapsed from exhaustion, Elena pushed herself beyond breaking point. When recruits sneered that she was only there to fill a quota, she silently outshot them at the range, her marksmanship precise and unflinching. She never raised her voice in anger, never pleaded for recognition. Her silence was her greatest weapon. It forced people to measure her by her actions, not her gender. By the time she led her first squad, the men who once mocked her now moved in lockstep at her command. Not because of fear, but because of something harder to earn, trust. But leadership in silence isn't only about strength in training. It's about carrying the unspoken weight of decisions that can cost lives. Elena learned this lesson in Afghanistan when her squad was pinned down in a valley with no reinforcements in sight. Panic rippled through the men. The youngest soldier, barely 19, froze, tears streaking down his dust-covered face. Elena crouched beside him, her hand steady on his shoulder. She didn't bark orders. She didn't shout. She whispered, "Breathe, watch me. We'll get out together." Her calm cut through the chaos, grounding her soldiers when fear threatened to break them. Minutes later, she guided them through a countermaneuver that saved every life in that valley. The silence of her leadership was not weakness, it was clarity. Her reputation spread quietly, carried not by her own voice but by those who had followed her. Men who once dismissed her became her fiercest defenders. "Ramirez doesn't need to yell," one sergeant later said. "When she looks at you, you just know she's already 10 steps ahead." But perhaps the hardest part of silent leadership is what remains unspoken even to oneself. Elena never celebrated her victories openly. She never boasted about medals or commendations. Instead, she carried the invisible scars of decisions no one else had to make. The mission where she ordered a retreat that saved her squad but left civilians vulnerable. The night she chose one life over another because time ran out. These choices carved themselves into her soul, a quiet burden that no one outside her position could ever truly understand. She bore them in silence because leaders often must. Leadership, after all, is not about glory. It is about responsibility. It is about being the steady hand when others falter, the calm voice when chaos roars, and the quiet strength that inspires others to push beyond what they thought possible. Elena's story reminds us that authority is not measured in volume, but in presence. The strongest leaders do not always need to speak. They need only to act. And in that silence, they command not just obedience, but respect. Behind every decorated officer and every celebrated mission lies a quieter battlefield, one fought not with bullets or strategy, but with memory, conscience, and loss. The hidden costs of service rarely make it into speeches or documentaries. They live in silence, in sleepless nights, and in the gaps between laughter at family gatherings. For Commander Hale, the costs came in the form of faces. He remembered them all, every soldier he had written letters home for, every comrade lowered into the ground beneath a flag. His chest carried medals, but his mind carried ghosts. And though he stood tall at parades, he admitted in private that sometimes the weight felt unbearable. Captain Rodriguez, outwardly the picture of strength, carried another kind of sacrifice. She had chosen duty over family more times than she could count. Birthdays missed, anniversaries forgotten, her daughter's first recital watched only through a grainy recording sent overseas. The medals on her wall did not quiet the guilt. "You tell yourself you're protecting them," she once said, "but you can't protect them from your absence." Then there was Staff Sergeant Lin, whose hidden cost came in silence. He returned from missions but rarely spoke of them. His wife often asked what he saw out there, but he would simply shake his head. For Lin, words could never bridge the gap between battlefield chaos and civilian peace. His sacrifice was choosing to carry the images alone, so his loved ones would never have to. These costs, psychological wounds, broken relationships, and invisible scars, were rarely acknowledged in the spotlight of military triumphs. Leaders bore them most heavily. To command meant making decisions that could never be undone, to send men and women into danger knowing not all would return. Leadership demanded composure in public, even when the soul fractured in private. Yet in every story, one thread remained: resilience. These hidden costs did not define them, though they marked them deeply. They pressed on not for recognition, but because to stop would mean letting sacrifice be in vain. The untold stories of command are not just about victories or medals. They are about the humanity behind the uniform, the pain carried quietly, and the strength to keep leading despite it all.